In the late 1980s, a bowler from Rowlett, Texas walked into a Professional Bowlers Association National Tour stop at Forum Bowl in Grand Prairie and began practice. He threw the ball with two hands. He had no thumb in the ball. The approach drew attention from a veteran standing behind him on the lanes, and within a few minutes, Harry Golden, the PBA's tournament director, came down to the approach and stood beside him. Golden asked about a hole in the ball. He asked whether it was for the thumb. The bowler said no, it was a weight hole. Golden told him that because of the way he bowled, he could not have a weight hole. Either the thumb went in that hole or the ball could not be used. The bowler ran to the pro shop, had a second ball re-drilled with a conventional grip, and finished the tournament with a shot he had not trained with. The hole in his original ball sat empty. His delivery, the one he had spent years developing, was ruled off the PBA national stage before he threw a single competitive frame. His name was Chuck Lande. He had 5 PBA Regional Tour titles using that two-handed no-thumb release. He was the first two-handed bowler to compete on the PBA's national circuit, and almost every account of where two-handed bowling came from does not mention him at all. The story the Professional Bowlers Association tells about two-handed bowling starts in 2004. That year, a 20-year-old bowler from Finland named Osku Palermaa appeared in the televised finals of the PBA United States Open at the Anaheim Convention Center, becoming the first two-handed bowler to compete in a PBA major on television. He did not win, but every camera in the building followed his approach. Then, 5 years later, Jason Belmonte, a bowler from Orange, New South Wales, won his first PBA Tour title at AMF Babylon Bowl in West Babylon, New York, and the sport decided it had a new era. 2 foreign-born players, unusual deliveries, a shift in the game. That is how the documentaries tell it. That is how the trade press tells it. That timeline begins roughly 15 years after the first two-handed bowler showed up at a PBA national event and had his ball sent to the pro shop. Belmonte now holds 32 PBA Tour titles, including a record 15 major championships. He generates up to 600 revolutions per minute on his delivery. He has won the Tournament of Champions, the PBA World Championship, the United States Open, the United States Bowling Congress Masters, and the PBA Players Championship, a combination known as the Super Slam. The PBA uses his image across every platform it operates. Two-handed bowling is the sport's commercial and competitive identity in 2026. That identity was built without crediting the man who was rolling the same delivery on the same tour while Palermaa was still a child. The Professional Bowlers Association in the 1980s was a one-handed sport. The dominant players were power strokers and crankers. 3-hole grips, pendulum swings, rev rates somewhere between 200 and 350 revolutions per minute. Long oil lane conditions where consistency and spare shooting won more often than power. The PBA rulebook was silent on the delivery. What it had, instead, was a tournament director with broad authority over equipment decisions and an institutional sense of what competition on the PBA national stage was supposed to look like. Equipment on the PBA Tour was governed by specifications maintained through what was then the American Bowling Congress, the predecessor organization to the United States Bowling Congress. Those specs covered cover stock hardness, core design, and the purpose of every hole drilled into a ball. A balance hole, also called a weight hole, was a drilling used to bring a ball within legal balance specifications under United States Bowling Congress measurement standards. It was routine. What it was not, in the administrative logic that Golden would apply, was a hole for a player who did not use a conventional grip. That ambiguity was the mechanism. The history of unorthodox grip deliveries in competitive 10-pin bowling goes back further than most people who follow the sport realize. John Gengler came to the United States from Luxembourg in the early 1900s and made his living as a traveling bowling hustler. No thumb, no fingers. He palmed the ball entirely with one hand and stepped to the line in a single stride. He had 6 recognized perfect games and retired at 44 in 1926 after losing a publicized match to Jimmy Smith of New York. The style was a spectacle. It was not a competitive threat. By the 1980s, Mike Miller out of Albuquerque, New Mexico had built a career on the PBA Tour using a thumbless one-handed delivery. Miller performed the backswing and release with no second hand. The rev rate it produced made him effective on low-friction lane conditions. In 1991, he won the PBA National Championship, taking home nearly $100,000. His thumbless release generated friction and comment, but it remained formally a single-handed delivery. The second hand was what changed the administrative calculation. A bowler from Florida named Mike DeGroot won a PBA regional title in March of 1985 using a two-handed approach. That is 2 years before Chuck Lande's first regional title. DeGroot never competed on the PBA National Tour. His name did not appear in any contemporaneous account of how two-handed bowling developed. It was recovered only after a reader contacted the bowling journalist Jeff Richgels at the news site 11thframe.com years after Richgels had first written about Lande to ask if he knew about DeGroot. He did not. The history had been there. Nobody had looked. Chuck Lande had been competing on the PBA Regional Tour out of Rowlett, Texas since 1987, rolling a no-thumb two-handed delivery that produced rev rates and entry angles. The rest of the field could not match with a conventional approach. His ball was drilled without a thumb hole. In its place was a weight hole, standard equipment, nothing that drew comment on the regional circuit. Then he entered a national tour stop. Form Bowl, Grand Prairie, Texas. Harry Golden, the PBA tournament director, came to the lanes. What Golden did next was administrative. He asked about the extra hole in Lande's ball. He asked whether it was for the thumb. Lande said no. It was a weight hole. Golden's response, as Land later recounted in the FloBowling documentary Two Hands on the Future, was that because of the way Lande bowled, he could not have a weight hole. The choice was to put the thumb in the hole or stop using the ball. There was no formal hearing. There was no written ruling posted on the tournament bulletin board. There was no appeal because nothing had been committed to paper in a form that permitted one. Golden had administrative authority over equipment decisions on the PBA national circuit. He applied that authority to the drilling configuration of a ball thrown by a man who did not bowl the way the tour's institutional eye expected him to bowl. The result was not a disqualification. It was something more efficient. Lande ran to the pro shop adjacent to Form Bowl, had a second ball re-drilled with a conventional three-hole grip, and finished the tournament on equipment he had picked up 2 hours before the first game. He did not bowl his two-handed shot at a PBA national event again. The weight hole ruling did not cite two-handed delivery as a violation. There was nothing in the PBA rulebook that explicitly prohibited the style. What the ruling used was a standard equipment specification, the balance hole. It applied a logic that converted Lande's no-thumb delivery into a technical disqualifier for the specific drilling he had brought to the event. The style itself was never banned. Its practitioner was simply made to use different equipment, drilled for a grip he did not throw every time he appeared at a national tour stop. One conversation in a Grand Prairie bowling alley established what was and was not administratively welcome on the PBA national stage. No document the tour would ever have to formally defend. Chuck Lande described the Form Bowl episode on camera in a FloBowling documentary called Two Hands on the Future, a film about the rise of two-handed bowling on the PBA tour. That documentary focused on Jason Belmonte and Osku Palermaa. The segment where Lande described having his equipment rejected at his first national tour stop appeared in the deleted scenes. Lande kept competing on the PBA Regional Tour after the Form Bowl event. For close to 2 decades, he was the most decorated two-handed bowler in PBA history at the regional level. No trade publication ran a feature on the Texan, who had been bowling two-handed on the PBA circuit since before Palermaa was old enough to hold a ball. No broadcaster asked to document his delivery. The PBA had not banned him. It had used a weight hole ruling to establish that his approach was technically impermissible on the national stage, and that was enough. Lande has a page on the PBA's own website, listing him as a member from Rowlett, Texas. His regional titles are recorded there. His name does not appear in any official PBA account of how two-handed bowling developed. By the time Palermaa made his United States Open television debut in Anaheim in 2004, the two-handed delivery had been on the PBA Regional Tour for 19 years. By the time Belmonte won at AMF Babylon Bowl in 2009, Lande's regional record was 22 years old. The PBA had no formal prohibition on the delivery when Palermaa arrived, and no formal prohibition when Belmonte arrived, because it had never needed one. Harry Golden's equipment ruling at a Grand Prairie pro shop had performed the same function without the institutional exposure a written ban would have created. When 2 foreign-born players arrived with the same approach and one in front of television cameras, there was nothing on paper to reverse, because nothing had ever been put on paper. In 2020, the United States Bowling Congress eliminated balance holes from all sanctioned competition entirely, ruling that extra holes beyond the conventional 3-hole grip would no longer be permitted. The rule applied to every bowler on every sanctioned surface, written, published, subject to formal review. It bore no relationship to what happened to Chuck Lande at Form Bowl in the late 1980s. The gap between those two institutional moments is the precise width of the mechanism Golden used. Jason Belmonte has 32 titles. Kyle Troop, Anthony Simonson, Jesper Svensson, and Sean Maldonado have all won on the PBA Tour with a two-handed delivery. The technique is now the default approach for a generation of junior bowlers across the country. Youth instructors teach it. Equipment manufacturers design balls around its rev rate demands. The PBA's television partners treat it as the defining aesthetic of the sport. There is rare promotional footage of Chuck Lande bowling in 1987 uploaded to YouTube with a title identifying him as the original two-handed PBA bowler. It has a few hundred views. Mike DeGroot, who won a PBA regional title in March of 1985 with the same delivery, 1 year before Lande's first regional. 2 decades before Palermaa and Belmonte, was brought back into the historical record only because one reader sent one email to a bowling journalist who had not heard the name. DeGroot holds no recognition in the formal history of the two-handed style. Neither does Lande. The pattern is not unusual. Dick Fosbury demonstrated a back-first high jump technique at the 1968 Mexico City Olympics that officials considered incorrect form. Within a decade, it was the only technique used at the elite level. The institution that expressed skepticism about the delivery eventually adopted it completely, with no formal accounting for how it had treated the people who used it first. In bowling, the mechanism is documented. Harry Golden used a weight hole ruling to make a two-handed bowler change his equipment at a national tour stop in Grand Prairie, Texas. The account exists in a deleted scene from a film about the rise of two-handed bowling on the PBA Tour. The two-handed delivery went on to produce the most successful competitor in the modern history of the Professional Bowlers Association. Chuck Lande holds no Bowling Hall of Fame recognition for arriving first. The PBA never issued a written prohibition on two-handed bowling. It did not need to. It had a tournament director, an equipment specification, and a pro shop in Grand Prairie. That was sufficient to establish what was and was not welcome on its national stage for the better part of 2 decades, until 2 foreign-born players made the question unavoidable and the sport discovered it had no objection after all. The ball Chuck Lande finished that tournament with is not on record anywhere. The ball he actually threw is.